All right, we're live. Welcome back to our first in-person Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab in, at least over a year. We are coming to you live from the Springbig office. I am interviewing one of my colleagues, so we figured instead of me sitting at home and working from home for the day, might as well do it right from her office here. So, folks, I know you're used to just me being on screen and hiding who my guest is. Some of you might already know who she is. Some of you don't, but by the time this interview is over, you certainly will know who she is and see her making a big splash in the industry. So with that being said, she is also going to be part of our panel tomorrow night, not even night, afternoon, 4:20 Eastern. Check that out. Go to Eventbrite and look for Cannabis Lab. You can join us tomorrow. If you want to check it out for free, use the code TECH420. That's going to get you in. It's going to be an awesome panel all about technology available for the cannabis industry. Now, brands and retailers can take advantage of that to grow and scale their business. We're talking a lot about data, different marketing channels, and everything else. It's going to be a really fun conversation. Of course, that's moderated by yours truly. So, considering she's sitting here so nicely while we figure out how we start these live shows, being I'm not the only one on camera right now, my guest today has joined the cannabis industry about 3 years ago. And in that time, she's made one hell of a splash. She's worked her way up in one of the most recognized and respected companies in the cannabis industry. She is also my boss. So my quarterly bonus this month is going to be based upon how many views and likes this gets, folks. So let's start smashing the like button, please. I could use a few bucks if you want to see the show continue. It's not free to run. So hit those like buttons, subscribe, and please welcome my guest today, the Vice President of Business Development for Springbig, Mikaela McLaughlin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm humbled. This is really nice. And I'm not going to give you an extra bonus just for saying nice things about me, but I appreciate it.
Well, I guess we're done here then. The funny part is, and I'm just going to address this because it's going to happen, is Tommy walking back and forth in the background.
Our coworker. Yep. He's always busy on the phone. So if you see a shadow outside the window, it's just our friend.
So Mikaela, I'm excited to do this. And it's funny because you and we've just started working together directly, and I've been getting to know you, and you've thrown a couple of things out there that I've wanted to talk to you about, but candidly, I've kind of been waiting for this to find out, right? You talk about your family's background in athletics, your own background in athletics, your relationship with cannabis and everything else. And I want to get to that, but let's talk about your background. So, what was your relationship to the plant prior to joining Springbig? Because like I said, we're all new to this. We're all been you've been in it longer than me at 3 years. I'm in about a year and a half, 2 years. When you had the opportunity to come to Springbig, was it just like, oh my God, I finally get to work in the industry? Was it the opportunity with technology? Tell me about that time in your life when this opportunity presented itself.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was kind of just a mix of fate and some hard work and really good luck. I actually had a coworker that I was working with at the company I was at previous to Springbig, who left and started running the accounting and finance team at Springbig. And she reached out and she kept on encouraging me, hey, you should really apply to Springbig. I think you'd love it. And I did some research and I realized, oh, this is interesting. It's technology and it's cannabis. And I threw my resume in, and the moment that I met the team at Springbig, I really just never looked back. And I think what's kind of cool about Springbig was I really was drawn to the technology, but the passion that I've brought every day to what I do, I don't think would have been there without the cannabis of it all. I had consumed cannabis periodically throughout my life and never really had like an awful stigma of cannabis, and definitely didn't have any concern about entering the cannabis space. And I did, though, have some of those reservations about like, who can I tell that this is what I do now? Or, who's going to be offended or upset to hear that I work for a cannabis company now. And to my surprise, the people that I thought were going to be the most offended and upset didn't care. And the people that I thought would be the coolest about it had the most to say. So it was kind of surprising, but I would say that my education of cannabis has definitely grown just kind of by default in my role. And I feel really, really honored to be able to be a part of the industry at a time where we're really deciding what the future of this industry is going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years.
No, it's crazy because, for me, I know a lot about the industry just from doing the show. A lot of it rubs off on the people I talk to, and it's cool to have somebody within these walls that I can have these really high level conversations about these multi-state operators down to the individual mom and pop shops. And the ins and outs of these businesses better than I do because you've been working with them. And I think it's cool. And so one of the things you'll learn about this show, and I know you've watched a few of them, is I go all over the place. So there's no rhyme or reason.
Me too.
So I think it's funny you talk about your background in athletics and your family's background in athletics. I think athletes make the best salespeople in a certain way, not to the point where we're like, and I kind of like this guy and don't so, but to the Jordan Belforts of the world where they just have a slick way of talking about them and they're charming, is if you can get an athlete to find something they're passionate about, then they will be the best salesperson that you will ever have, because you can put passion in an athlete's hand and there's no stopping them. So I look at you and just coming here and combining your passion of sales, because you find things that really resonate with you, and then your kind of competitive background in athletics, I feel like it makes you the perfect candidate for what you're doing. And I'm not just saying that because I work with you. If we were different companies, you worked for Headset or something else like that, I'd feel the exact same way. Do you see that with a lot of the people that you work with, you hire, and even in yourself?
Yeah, I think that athletics is hands down the thing in my life that has taught me some of the most valuable lessons. And my brother actually just got into a sales role, and he was texting me the other day about a huge sale that he closed. And I told him, like, dude, how good does that feel? And we were saying, like, athletes make the best salespeople because we have enough of the competitive spirit. And we hate to lose. So that grit that I feel like I've learned from athletics has carried me very far in my career. And I feel fortunate as well that I grew up around a coach. My father was a football coach my whole life, and my mom was a teacher. So the type of leadership that I learned wasn't from the CEO of a company. I was watching my dad coach sports, and we laugh all the time. I call him and I'm like, Dad, I was like dealing with, someone that works for me, and like, they're great at what they do, but they just kind of had this like cocky attitude, and I don't want to diminish their passion and their excitement, but I have to tamper this. And I'll call him and just say, like, I watched you teach this to a 16-year-old kid that was a great wide receiver on the football field. That, it's a lot of that stuff just translates really well. And I think I've been able to call my dad and say, like, hey, thank you. And like, I've called my coaches from high school and said, thank you, because what I learned as that 16-year-old girl that wanted to quit or give up or whatever, like, I needed to learn those lessons. And I feel like I'm better in my adult professional life because I learned those lessons young. And, I think also, like, athletics has, I would say, is one of the things that gave me my own stigmas about cannabis, because I think especially in high school, you're told that if you want to go to college, if you want to be a D1 athlete, if you want to be a successful athlete, you can't drink, you can't smoke weed, you got, say no, say no, say no. And so I feel like that was one of the stigmas that I had to work on breaking as I got older, was that, obviously, no kid should be doing drugs or drinking in an ideal world. But as an adult, I had to break that stigma of, this isn't going to make me lazy. This isn't going to make me some degenerate. Like, I think we have these really woven in stigmas that most people have probably felt in their life.
Yeah. No, you bring up a great topic, and this is one that I love talking about. It is cannabis and athletics. And thank you for the natural transition, a lot better than I could do. But this is a big topic now with different sports leagues around the country not testing for cannabis, and not necessarily allowing it, but not demonizing what it was before. To your point, I agree. High school athletes, people that we don't know the science behind it and what that does to developing minds. So I don't think we can endorse that yet. But as you get to higher levels of competition, college and then professional, it's funny. Cannabis is demonized in sports. I have a good friend of mine, and I'm going to try to be vague about this because if I say it detailed, my friends will know who it is. And he hasn't, I don't want to out him in a national platform here, but he played for a college sport, played for a school, got kicked off the team because he smoked weed, transferred, went to a better school and got on the team because he was a great athlete. He just happened to choose using cannabis over anything else to disconnect or relax or to, deal with your aching body and everything else. I'm friends with Ricky Williams, who famously has done the exact same, right? So we look at the studies of what these athletes are doing to their body long-term, and then we want to demonize them for smoking weed or even not even smoking it, taking an edible or doing something else instead of opiates or other pharmaceuticals or other non-authorized treatments that are going on. And if we can just give them cannabis, it's a lot better for them. So I'd love to hear your take on this. I think you might have some personal stories around this, but it is crazy to me that all of a sudden now we have this flip of the script where it's like, I think we're going to accept cannabis in athletics, and almost, I would say, looking forward, it might be promoted, at least from a CBD standpoint.
Yeah, it's been for me so exciting to see some of the professional sports organizations allow their players to consume or at least, stop testing for it. I don't think anybody's condoning it just yet. Hopefully we'll get there
soon, hopefully.
Right. But I'm actually excited because my parents both retired in the last year. So I can finally throw them under the bus. Because as you can imagine, as coaches and teachers, I've really not wanted to talk about my family's relationship with cannabis for a long time.
I'm sure.
I actually just saw recently a teacher in Broward lost her job for having a medical card. And so it still is really, really sensitive, especially here in Florida. But the first time I was ever exposed to cannabis, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I was snooping around in my garage looking for my Christmas presents. I was probably like 10 or 11. And I was looking through, some drawers in my dad's workbench, and I opened this drawer and I see this little film canister. And I had this like flutter in my stomach that like I found something I wasn't supposed to find. I knew full well it was not one of those Christmas presents too, but I opened the top and I just remember like sniffing it and being like, oh, that smells so weird. Like, what is that? And I just like closed the lid and put it away, and I never brought it up again. And then the first time that I ever consumed cannabis, I remember thinking, oh, that's what that smell was in the garage. But I, kind of like fast forwarding, my dad played sports. My dad played football for a long time. And in the last 10 or 15 years, he's had a knee replacement, a shoulder replacement, a full hip replacement. He withstood some pretty insane injuries over the course of his athletic career. And I look back and I say, thank you to cannabis, because I don't think my childhood would have been the same if my dad was going into the garage to pop a couple oxys or Percocets. Him being able to go out into the garage and smoke a couple hits, the wellness benefits that he was getting from that afforded me the life that I never had a dad that needed heavy pharmaceuticals to cope with what he had put his body through. So I'm really, really hopeful for a day where more athletes, and especially professional athletes, I mean, that is just a different level of toll on your body. But people that retire from college athletics, I mean, it is a big toll. And I think just being able to help inflammation, pain, anxiety, with a natural choice should be available to everybody. So it is exciting for me to start to see some of those athletic organizations come around. And like Ricky Williams, I mean, who more deserves to smoke a joint than a professional football player that just got tossed around on the field for 4 hours for our entertainment. Like, come on, those guys deserve a break. The women that are playing professional soccer and basketball, we owe it to people like that to give them a little bit of healthy reprieve.
Yeah. It's interesting because not only just the recovery aspect, but I think a lot of us, like, now that mental health has come more to the limelight, people look for tools where it's like, listen, we all have mental health issues. We have our good days and bad. And I think more people are opening up about that. But at the end of the day, we still have jobs and responsibilities, and it's very hard to manage those together. If you're having financial issues, relationship issues, or anything else like that, it easily affects your work, whether you're a professional athlete or just a person who works in an office, right? So it's interesting for me, and I think a lot of athletes feel the same way. Like, it helped me kind of not forget about the issues that are going on, but just kind of put them in perspective and be like, okay, if I don't focus on what I'm about to do, my work, my job, those issues might get worse. So if I want to work on that stuff, it starts with step one by going into that office and focusing on my job and doing the best that I can. And that's going to start a chain reaction that hopefully affects the other things. And I think sometimes cannabis helps people put that in perspective. We're getting really deep here. I like this conversation.
Me too.
So,
me too.
But I think cannabis helps people put that in perspective where it's like, I have anxiety about these things. It's crippling me. But if I led into it, my performance of what I'm about to do is just going to make that stuff worse. And I'm only going to feel worse. So I think, like you said, when you have a guy like Ricky, because he shared his story with me, and I keep bringing him up because I don't have
what
a
better
dad
example. And there's not a lot of examples of athletes that are willing to be open about how cannabis has helped them.
100%.
So he's kind of like the namesake of somebody that was willing to put themselves out there. I mean, a long time ago, before anybody was even willing to have a conversation like we're having today.
So he shares a story, and I love it because, like everybody else, even though he was superhuman in college, he was still a college kid, and he was in a relationship, and he went through a bad breakup. And he goes, my roommate handed me a joint, told me I needed to chill. So my next 2 games, he goes, I went 300 yards and 350 yards, and I won the Heisman Trophy. So at the end of the day, if we had Ricky sitting in the backfield thinking about his ex-girlfriend who just broke his heart and not thinking about getting that ball through the hole. And I don't even remember if this was the case, if it was the backup quarterback or the quarterback. So here you are in the backfield looking at the ass of the guy who stole your girlfriend, and you want to focus. Like, I mean, he could have easily just, I'm going to drop this handoff and make him look bad. Right.
Yeah.
But instead, he put his life in perspective. He looked at what he wanted to do. He wanted to have a platform, and that's how he looked at athletics, to be able to send his message. And by focusing on football, he was able to accomplish that. And now, he defended cannabis on the largest platform. So it's interesting to me. And again, going back to that topic, of cannabis in your life and my life, do you think now that mental health and everything else is such at a forefront, and people are more open about the things and the suffering they're going on in their life, that a tool like this is more needed, and people should understand how to leverage it the right way? I'm not saying like go straight Cheech and Chong on the way to work and come in where you can't do anything. But if you know your limits, whether that's CBD, whether that's a ratio, whether that's a half a joint for some people, and you truly understand that that can benefit you, that this is something people should be looking at.
Yeah, I think that more people than ever, to your point, are aware of the importance of mental health. And I'm really glad to be living at a time where I can openly say I've struggled with depression, or I've struggled with anxiety, or I've struggled with PTSD. And so I think because there's more talk and awareness, there's more people searching for reprieve.
Yeah.
I think for a long time, people just thought that the anxiety that they were dealing with, or that depression, was just a part of the human experience. And I think to a certain degree it is, right? Because the same way as our physical health fluctuates, some days you have a stomach ache, some days you stub your toe. I think mental health is similar. But because it's being discussed, because people are willing to be brave and talk about their struggles, I think there's more people than ever looking for something to help. And I know from my own mental health, cannabis has been a wonderful tool for me, and kind of like my wellness tool belt, if you will. I'm really high strung and sped up, and cannabis really helps me to slow down, to think about all of the options in front of me and not just the one that's in the forefront of my mind at the moment. And I think it really just allows me to slow down and have more compassion and empathy for every situation that I'm handling. And I'm very appreciative of that wellness benefit of cannabis. And I think, a lot of people think that because it makes us feel good, it can't be medicinal in some way. And I would really, challenge that status quo. And, I always say, I think I've said this to you before, like my sentiments are always, thank you, cannabis, for taking care of me so I can take care of business. And I feel like I'm so much more of a whole and well-rounded person because of cannabis. And I'm also excited that cannabis is paving a way for additional plant medicines to be evaluated. As I think when we look at mental health, we're seeing a time right now where there's unprecedented studies being done on psilocybin, ketamine, DMT, MDMA, and there's some outstanding healing properties that are being found. I mean, from research institutions like Johns Hopkins and really credible research establishments that are kind of giving us the facts that anecdotally I think we've seen for a long time, and that indigenous leaders working with plant medicine have known for eons. So I'm exciting. I think cannabis is really, really paving a way for a lot of other plant medicines too.
No, it's interesting because, I think even as soon as like 5 years ago, yes, I was a bit advocate for cannabis because I used it recreationally. But I would say, if you would have talked to me back then and talk about all this, I don't know what my opinion would have been because, I didn't know the studies and everything else, but I look at the world a little bit differently now. And I don't know if it's because of my education on cannabis. I remember way back in college, I had a geography professor that was telling me, I don't remember if it was Prague or somewhere in Europe, that had decriminalized all drugs. And they had these safe injection sites. And because of that, the overdoses and the drug use and everything else went down because they removed the taboo and the stigma. And then the people that were addicted or that were using were getting clean stuff. So at that point, it's working with them on their issues and getting them off, and not worried that one day you're going to find them in a gutter somewhere. Right now, obviously, I'm not that educated on it. It was my senior year. It was a class I needed as a bullshit credit before to graduate. I'm hats off to the professor because he was awesome and kept me interested. And I showed up every day. I was half paying attention. So I looked at that and I'm like, and that stuck with me, where we talk about the war on drugs and everything else. And then fast forward, my wife is an addiction counselor when we met. And, I learned more about this. And, it's a quote that I say often. I think a lot of people do, but what's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So we look at the way that we deal with drug addiction and PTSD and mental health. And if things aren't working, I don't know why so many people are opposed to some out of the box thinking. Now we'll go really deep here. And I learned this from Rogan, so I don't want to put any credibility behind it because I haven't done my own research. But there's also a lot of school of thought that's saying a lot of these things that we talk about in ancient texts in the Bible were people on psychedelics or other type of drugs. And those were the visions where they talked to God and they just didn't understand what was going on then. Right. So like when they talk about Moses and the burning bush, there's theories that that was some type of psychedelic, that's how it was consumed or anything else like that. And it's interesting to put that in perspective, because then you fast forward to modern times and you have people like Steve Jobs, who advocated for his LSD use, people like Paul McCartney. Right. Now, these are people who are revered in the highest levels. Now, obviously, Jobs, his personality is in question because he's a little bit of a dick, kind of like Ellen DeGeneres is. But apparently he's better at it because he, changed the world with Apple. He didn't just make people dance on television.
Well, to the Steve Jobs thing, I mean, I had an experience where I was on psychedelics and I was sitting in my backyard and I had my AirPods in and I had my iPhone in my hand. And I was scrolling through my phone, my library, to find a song to listen to. And it just dawned on me, of course that guy was on psychedelics when he was thinking about all of this stuff. Like, imagine being on psychedelics in even the 80s and laying in a field and thinking, I wish I had a little device
Yeah.
where I could listen to any song I wanted to listen to. And I think that, you know, so many of these minds that have had some of the most revolutionary ideas in recent history
Elon Musk, another example.
have straight up said, plant medicine helped me get there.
Yeah.
And I am excited because I think we are seeing so much less stigma. There's still a really, really long way to go. There's a very
Yeah.
long way to go. I mean, when you bring up magic mushrooms or LSD, I mean, if I bring up DMT to someone, most of the time they haven't even heard of it.
Yeah.
Or I just think that overall, with these types of psychedelics, we're already seeing a ton more, in my opinion, clinical trials in the US or research in the US on psilocybin or ketamine than we are on cannabis right
Yeah.
now. It's from everything I'm seeing, it's looking like they're taking a little bit of a different
I
approach.
think that just changed though, actually. I think if I remember, I saw yesterday or today that the University of Mississippi's monopoly on researching cannabis is over, that they're actually going to open up the ability for other universities to research.
I didn't see that. That's
I gotta
amazing
look.
news. That's amazing news.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I think you know,
I
we
could
need
be
the
100%
research.
wrong. That happens, but
Yeah.
it would be exciting if that happened, to your point, that we're seeing more in psychedelics than cannabis.
Yeah. And I think that for me, I'm excited for a day where any plant that could help anyone is accessible. And I've seen, I feel like firsthand, I'm a millennial, to throw
Yeah.
myself out there. I feel like that's a dirty word these days. But I'm a millennial, and I feel like my generation in particular has been devastated by the opiate epidemic.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what drives me to decriminalize nature. Is I think about the friends that I've lost and the family that I've lost. And to your point, the treatment that's available is not working. The recovery statistics for people that complete the current treatment that's
Yeah.
available for opiate abuse is something ridiculous. Like 5% of people are actually successful. And I really get frustrated some days when I see people trying to stifle cannabis law and trying to stifle plant medicine law because it's drugs, because it's, you know, potential for addiction. I'm sorry. If you've ever done 3.5 or 4 grams of shrooms, I would be very hard pressed to find anybody that wants to start abusing psilocybin. Like, I feel like the medicine will teach you better if you tried.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for a day when there's alternatives. I actually have a friend that a group of friends that are buddies of my husband that have started doing, they started going to the Amazon. They've visited all types of different countries and trained with indigenous people. They actually specialize mainly in, one specializes in a plant medicine called ibogaine.
Okay.
And then one specializes in a plant medicine called Cambo. And
First one sounds pharmaceutical. That's kind of funny.
ibogaine is actually
Prescription ibogaine might
right,
cause no.
right. It kind of sounds like Rogaine.
Yeah.
Ibogaine is showing outstanding promise with treating opiate abuse because typically the withdrawal period for opiates can last so long and it's so painful. This is actually helping people detox within 24 to 48 hours. It's giving them outstanding, powerful spiritual experiences, helping them kind of re-examine their life to that point. And then the real beauty of it is they come out of that experience and they're not dope sick.
Yeah.
So what I found is that from talking to those guys who are treating people, I mean, they tell me that they have calls from parents that are like, listen, I don't know what the F ibogaine is, but my kid has gone to 30 treatment centers in the last 3 years. I just had to drag them out of a trap house. I'm willing to try
Yeah.
this. So there are a ton of people looking for plant medicine. And I think to your point that with the mounting mental health crisis in our country, people are more and more desperate than ever for something that's going to help. And I'm glad that there's people willing to work so hard at making it available and take that risk like people did for so long in cannabis.
100%. And it's funny because we talk about plant medicine and these therapies that are being developed. The only difference between plant medicine and a pharmaceutical is a bunch of guys in white coats grabbed a plant, extracted what they needed, put a bunch of chemistry shit together and put it in pill form. And that's okay because, you know, AstraZeneca said it was okay, or GlaxoSmithKline said it was okay, or Pfizer, Moderna. But if you find that plant in itself, and we know now with cannabis, the benefits, the entourage effect of all the things in that plant, and that plant benefits you, that's bad because there's no middleman. So, you know, it's funny that all these new treatments and everything else is being demonized because it's not the established companies that said it's okay or saying it's okay. It's other people that are sharing their experiences. And now, again, I think there's a lot of stuff that still might be dangerous and everything else. And that's why I'm so happy about the research around everything. But it is interesting to me how if one of these, you know, companies with like 9 syllables in their name says it's okay and puts it in a swallowable form, then we're okay. You know, cannabis makes you feel good. Well, Prozac is supposed to make you feel good too, but that's, you know, highly addictive and it fucks some people up. So, you know, it's really interesting, just how people view the world. And it's fun to be on this side of the battle, right? Because I've been on the other side a lot of the no's, right? And I think being in this industry has really opened up my mind to a lot of different things because you meet a lot of interesting people that you would probably, because of the stigma of cannabis, which is weird because I'm in the industry, you would probably not cast aside, but not listen to, be like, that person's crazy or they're stoned or whatever. But now you start to be like, well, tell me about that. Why do you view it that way? What are your experiences that led you to that view? And you just meet so many cool people in this industry that it has changed my mind. So, you know, it is interesting to be on this side of the fight. And now having a show like this to talk to people like you to say, like, these are the experiences that we're all having that nobody's talking about, but we're starting to talk about it together. Right. And that's why I love this industry. So we went off on probably the longest tangent in show history, just talking about everything else.
I love it.
I
will do that to you. I'm sorry.
100%. We're doing this instead of a pipeline review, by the way. So thanks everybody for getting me out of that. No, I'm just
giving
kidding.
us an hour to play hooky.
Exactly. That is true. We do get to mess around for an hour here. We should have done this outside by the pool. That would have been more fun.
We should have.
Next time. Yep. For sure. So you've been at Springbig for 3 years now, which, I mean, let's be honest, 3 years is the length of the California legal market almost, right? So I would love to talk to you about the early days here and kind of just the early days of the industry and how you've seen things evolve over time, right? You know, just whether it's within the 4 walls here or just the people that you've been working with, the markets that you see maturing, because I feel like you have such an insight into how this industry has come along from as long as 2017, 2018.
It has, I like to say that it has to be dog years because of like just how much has changed. It doesn't feel like it possibly could have just been 3 years. I would say that one of the biggest changes has just been watching a lot of the states that were medical go rec, like Michigan and Massachusetts. The market in Michigan, the changes there. I mean, 2 years ago, the way that their licenses were structured, there was a really, really thriving kind of gray - black market that was really discrediting a lot of the licensed providers there. And it was making it very hard for patients to know who was carrying legitimate medicine and kind of what was what. So that market has matured leaps and bounds. And that's been a market that I've really enjoyed watching because I think seeing a state like Michigan, that's such a, I want to say, like, blue collar, gritty state where you have people that have been working in factories or just grinding for their whole lives. Like, those are the people that really need cannabis the most. So seeing that market evolve has been really fun. Arizona has changed so much. I mean, over the last 3 years, I've seen in waves, multi-state operators drop into that market, scoop up 6 stores at a time, in preparation for that market going rec. And they only awarded rec licenses to the existing dispensaries first. So, and then like California, I mean, the watching them go from, I mean, it was a couple years ago when they had to get rid of all of their product, when they changed their testing requirements. I mean, when people think that it's easy to be in this industry, you have another thing coming. Like, this is not a get rich quick scheme. This is hard work, day in and day out, constantly evolving, constantly changing. And that's certainly reflected in our business at Springbig, where, you know, we've grown from, you know, our software doing one thing to it doing more because dispensaries needed more, and then tying in brands because brands needed access to the marketing capabilities that we have. So the industry has changed a lot, but what I'm happy to report really hasn't changed is the like-mindedness that I encounter on just about every single call I get onto, whether it's a panel like the one that I'm doing with you, or if it's a webinar with other companies, if I'm hopping on a call with a brand or a dispensary, I'm never not surprised at the wind I get in my sails, just realizing like, this person gets it. And not from a perspective of did they buy Springbig, but just, wow, like I had a great conversation. I taught them something. I learned something. I feel like that grassroots kind of family vibe hasn't been lost. And I'm excited for more and more legalization, because I think in order for us to destigmatize cannabis, we have to give people a shot of consuming it successfully. And the black market does not do that. When I talk to somebody that hasn't consumed cannabis in 5, 10, 15 years, I haven't smoked pot since I was in college. Their first thing is always, I got way too high. I was so paranoid. I thought I was going to have to go to the hospital. And then you find out it's like, oh, well, it was some edible that my boyfriend at the time had no idea how much was in it. Or I had done 15 shots of tequila and smoked half a joint. And it's like, you didn't set yourself up for success. Like, my mom is someone that loves cannabis, loves the effects that it gives her, but she has a very sensitive tolerance. She needs a 2 milligram little edible to microdose or, you know, some type of ratio product. You can't get that on the black market. You know, like when we really give people a ton of options in how they consume, I think the stigma will really start to shed, because people are going to have not these like battle, you know, war stories of the last time they consumed cannabis. It can be a really different and positive experience. So I've been stoked to see the growth in the industry over the past 3 years, and just the availability for people that are looking for the reprieve it brings.
I agree with you. And I know I'm excited for a lot of that too. I think I talk about this on the show a lot, is people's first impression with cannabis, and whether it's the first impression in a long time or just the first impression ever. I talk to a lot of CBD companies, and even in that note, like I look at the CBD industry and I like seeing it being cleaned up and taking some of this garbage CBD out of bodegas and places like that, because I think if people are going to dip their toe in the water with CBD, I want to see it come from a very reputable company like the ones that have been on the show. But, you know, the reputable companies, because I want them to have a good experience and not some bullshit they bought at the gas station at the cash register because it was there. And then when we get into actual cannabis with THC, again, like you said, there are people who are trying it again that haven't had it since the 70s and 80s. And that's when people started doing the indoor grows and hydroponics and started crossbreeding and looking for better strains and stronger strains and everything else. So the shit that we're smoking today is not like the stuff that they were smoking in the 80s and 70s. And I have to tell people, I get you used to do this. And I got this from Houseplant when they launched in Canada. Seth Rogen talks about it all the time. Take one hit, wait 15 minutes, see how you feel, take another hit. Just because you see Seth Rogen or Snoop Dogg or Elon Musk put down a whole joint, like, it doesn't mean that you can too. Just because, you know, and they have that stigma about, like, I see a meme that goes around the internet where it's like, you want free weed, just tell a stoner you've never been high before. But we need to retire that, like, oh, I'm going to get you like ripped. Like, no, I'm going to give you a good curated experience with cannabis. And then at the next point, if you want to go further, that's on you. But at least I'm going to give you the proper introduction.
We have to be good stewards of the plant. And I talk often about, you know, encouraging others that are talking to people about cannabis. Like, you don't know how that strain is going to affect that person. You don't know how that particular amount of milligrams, like, we have to be responsible in how we encourage people to try it. And I have actually a coworker at Springbig who has not consumed since college. And I was on a trip out in California and I brought her back just one of the Kikoko teas that was a ratio product that had some CBN, some CBD, little bit of THC. And she was like, oh my gosh, I never would have known that I could drink this tea. She's like, I didn't get messed up. I just was relaxed and I had a great night's sleep and I needed it so badly. And so I feel like it's a shame to me that in our market here in Florida, it's been structured in such a way that we don't have a lot of those luxuries of the craft brands that have gotten creative to make sure that there's a product in the cannabis market for anyone that wants to try cannabis. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that if people like us keep on being loud about our feelings, that it will change. And sometimes I get a little bit discouraged, like, how loud is my voice really? And then I just kind of gut check myself and say, like, imagine if 40 years ago, Steve D'Angelo would have said, how loud is my voice really going to be? Or if Ricky Williams said, how loud is my voice really going to be? Like, the pioneers that have built this industry for us and laid the groundwork. I feel like at a bare minimum, I owe it to those people to be loud and to not settle. Because something that I really wrestle with is like the ridiculous amount of privilege that I have as a white woman to be making an incredible living off of this plant while people are sitting incarcerated for the same plant that I'm profiting off of. Like, that just really weighs on me. I'm not okay with that. So I am very intrinsically motivated, and I tell myself every day that I have to do something to push this industry forward in a better way. So I try to be really diligent about showing up when I can to speak up about things that aren't right in our industry. I know, like, one of our coworkers yesterday was up at the Capitol in Denver to, you know, stand with the industry there as they have some concentrate law, just BS going on. Colorado, out in Colorado. So she was, I told her, I'm so proud to know that you're doing that, because it's a really important part of being a good member of this industry, in my opinion.
No, I think it's great because the people within these four walls are like that. We do advocate for the industry. I remember when we were looking at the 10% THC cap, literally that day, it was probably 90% of the conversations in the office, right? So, you know, I'm proud to be part of an organization that way. I know you and I are working on a really cool social project, justice project that we can't talk about yet.
Yes,
because
I'm really excited.
So so I'm excited. Hopefully we can announce on the show when it happens. So I'm glad that you're behind that and driving it, because I know your passion. And I got to be honest, your voice is loud. You're the VP of business development for one of the largest technology companies in the industry. So I'm glad that you continue to voice your opinion and that you are an advocate for this, because it does matter, right? And I think all the voices matter. And I think our coworker, even though she was one of many in that courthouse, her being being there means something to us. It means something to the
Yeah.
industry, and it means something to the other people in that crowd. And I'm glad that you encourage that too.
Yeah.
So, it's really cool to be part of this industry and just see all the like-mindedness and see all the co-opetition and collaboration that everyone's
Yeah.
doing, right? It's been so much fun. I mean, I just know myself in the last 6 months, the conversations that I've had, or 8 months maybe, that have just changed from like month 1, 2 here versus month 7 and 8,
Mm-hmm.
where I talk to new marketing people coming into this industry and they're like, I'm going to do this and that and that. And I'm like, you can't do that. And no worry, we're going to, and then, 2 weeks later, like, so I can't do any of that. And then you get other people where I get on the phone. I'm like, well, you can't do X, Y, and Z. They're like, yeah, I know. So what do you got for me? And we start talking strategy, some out of the box stuff. And like, I like that. That's what we need. And it's really cool to see a lot of these. And I get it. They come from very successful backgrounds in CPG and beverage and everything else. And they just don't realize the high level of restrictions that we have to face in this industry. And they come in, they get smacked in the face, and they're like, all right, I thought out of the box the first time. That's what made me as good as I am today. Let me take a step back and do that again. You have been doing this for longer than I can. So I can only imagine the type of conversation we're having around what we do 3 years ago versus today has completely changed. And the people on the other end of the phone, like, they're much more aware of the importance of what we do and other people like us and how restricted this industry is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, I think like, even if I look back to like when I started at Springbig 3 years ago, I think there was still this air that, it's weed and it's just going to sell itself. And I think as competition stiffens, people really did wisen up and realize like, oh yeah, it might sell itself, but why are they going to buy it from me? Or if you're a brand, why are they going to buy my product? Right. And so I think it's been nice to see. I think especially in the last 3 years, the amount of intentionality that retailers and brands are putting into curating their story and solidifying their voice. They've grown leaps and bounds. I would say 3 years ago when I started at Springbig, if I was doing 10 demos for 10 different retailers, probably 7 of them didn't have a website. Today, if I ask my team, hey, of the last 10 demos you've done, how many people didn't have a website? It might still be 1 or 2, which is too many in my opinion in 2021. But people are starting to realize, okay, I need the e-commerce part of it. I need the marketing communication side of it. So the conversation has definitely progressed. We're also seeing an insane amount of M&A throughout the industry. So more and more big players that own lots of locations across multiple states. And that's really where I feel like Springbig has grown, in that for the last 3 years, we've always worked with enterprise, multi-state operator clients. And fortunately, we've really allowed their feedback to guide a lot of where we've taken the platform. So we've seen our system grow and change a lot because the needs have grown and changed, and the regulations around what you can say, what you can't say, all of that kind of nuanced stuff changes a lot. And we always say at Springbig, like, we are built by and for dispensaries. So it's not a surprise to us that when we woke up this morning, something changed and we have to innovate and we have to iterate. Like, it's the same thing as, going back to that idea that, like, how hard do you think it was for those retailers and brands in California a couple of years ago that had to destroy all their product? Like, we are constantly having to think about what's next, what is changing. And for me, it's the biggest blessing because I get bored very easily. So at Springbig and in the cannabis industry, it's perfect because just by default, nothing stays the same for long enough for you to get bored.
It's crazy. And that's why I love this industry too. It's always changing. You've got to be on your toes and you've got to be able to adapt. And funny enough, until I got into this industry, those were probably all my weaknesses. And being this industry made me really have to focus on that. And it's been a wild ride. I want to say for you, because 3 years ago, you came in and you were just dealing directly with clients. And
Yeah.
today you're the VP of business development. You've got 2 or 3 sales teams under you. You've got departments under you, but you still do a very good job of maintaining this family-like atmosphere, a sense of camaraderie and just wonder. And everybody's, I say this again, not because I work with you, but part of the reason I like it is when we walk in that door that morning, everybody seems to be happy to be here and want to do what we do. I joke around with my friends, like I get to be the Don Draper of cannabis, even though we're selling a freaking piece of software. When it comes to marketing in this industry, a lot of times we have to get involved and put together a marketing strategy and a campaign. And I joke around, like, I'm like, all right, Brett, I need all this data and I need a gray suit and tie. Like, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Right. So it's been really fun. But for you, how was that evolution from account manager up the chain where, especially for a long time when you were running this department, you had people who had been here with you for a while. They saw you fight in the trenches. They saw what you did. And then now you're bringing up this new crop of younger salespeople coming in, diverse backgrounds. Some have cannabis experience, some have software experience, and kind of corral everybody together on the mission, because I think you've done such a great job of it. That's why I've enjoyed working with you. So I'd love to understand, like, how do you take your experiences? Like, how have you made that easy transition from just someone who, let's be honest, as an account manager, I'm out there, I eat what I kill, like it's about me for the most part, to, okay, now this is all of us. And I've got to make sure that everybody's coming up together and everyone has everyone's back. And like, you're right now back where your dad was. You're the head coach, you know?
Thank you. That's like the biggest compliment ever for me, is to know that the people that are working with me, for me, are happy, and that
Oh yeah, if
they
I was
appreciate that. And
lying,
to be
we wouldn't be
compared
doing this. Trust
and
me.
to be compared to my father is one of the biggest compliments on the face of the earth. So I will take it. I would say that for me and my journey at Springbig in particular, I came in as hire number 10, and we have, for context, over 140, I think, employees today. So I feel like I came in at a time where even if you were an individual contributor, you had to be a leader, because there was just too much to do and no way to say no. Like, I ran the social media for Springbig for the first year I worked here, because I just saw that marketing needed a hand and I had experience in it. So, that it did come naturally, but I'll say that I'm fortunate that the leadership above me at Springbig, namely our CEO, Jeff Harris, he leads a people first organization. And I feel like that's a huge part of our success, of why, like, even I'm so happy to show up here every day, is that we really do come first. People, whether it's our people, whether it's our clients, people always come first here. And so I look at, how can I, if I'm showing up well and impacting my people's lives in a positive way, I could never ask for too much. Like, when I have to ask somebody to do anything at Springbig, everyone is happy to do it, because they're excited to be here and they see it as an opportunity. It's been interesting. I feel like my growth, I grew up with 2 older brothers. Grew up on the sideline of a football field my whole life. I feel like it never dawned on me that, like, I'm a woman and that there's something about that is different than for men. And I really had never felt that in my career until I got to the vice president level. I feel like that did impact my mindset in certain ways, where I saw people trying to jump over me to talk to my boss because they didn't want to talk to the 30-year-old woman. So it's been interesting. There's been a lot of growth. And I feel like I'm so fortunate that everyone that worked alongside me, my guys that were my coworkers for 2.5, 3 years, that now work on my team, all have so much respect for me. I almost feel like I was fortunate in that, like, I didn't have to come in and convince a bunch of people that I knew how to sell, or that I knew this industry, or I knew our clientele base. I think they really believed in me, and I had that luxury, which is great. And I feel like because I'm authentic, leadership comes naturally to me because I'm not scared to ever say, I don't actually know about that. Like, I always joke, like, I don't know my multiplication tables. When I was in third grade and I was supposed to be learning them, I told my teacher, my brothers are in middle school and high school, and they both have calculators for all of their classes. And my brain is only so big. So I'd have to imagine that there's only a certain amount of room in it. And this just seems silly for me to have to reserve space in my brain for. So you can imagine how that conversation with my teacher and my mom went. I don't think my mom has ever been more mortified in her entire life than having to hear that. Of course, I know most of them now, but like, I'm not a math person, and there's a lot of numbers in my job. And I'm never scared to say to somebody, I need you to explain this to me. I feel like I have the benefit of I check my ego at the door. So I'm not scared to ask for help when I need it, or to say, that's a term I've never heard before. And there's a lot of those in cannabis. If I'm talking to someone that's working in an extraction facility, they could be talking about things that I have no idea about. I feel like being curious and being humble enough to say, I've actually never heard about that. Could you tell me about it? I feel like that's a big part of why I am where I am too, because if somebody tells me once, I will remember. So I think just the hungriness to learn. So I outed myself. I told you my number one secret and my biggest flaw, that I'm terrible at multiplication.
This helps you with your nines.
I know the nines trick.
I know the nines.
Yep. I know the nines. Yep.
It's funny that you say that, the curiosity, right? Because, and one of your coworkers is probably gonna be busting in the door in just a second, because I know he has the meeting right after this one. But
he can wait.
He can. Is he gonna knock? This is the fun of doing a live show, folks. I was going somewhere to, the curiosity, right? Because early on in the beginning of my career here, I worked with someone who felt that he needed to be an authority, and he felt like he needed to know everything. And he was a lot more focused on becoming a cannabis celebrity than actually doing his job. And in my opinion, since we left, we weren't working together, and I've started this show from the point of curiosity, right? A lot of people are like, so much. I have people reaching out to me like, I'd love to pick your brain on the industry and everything else. I'm like, do you watch the show? Like, I ask questions.
I'm the one asking questions.
Yeah, like, I'm asking questions. Like, I'm not asking loaded questions. I truly want to know the answer to it, right? So, but I think taking that attitude and just being open to other people's opinions and their point of view, and taking all that together and putting action on the things that you think are best, really helps people excel, right? And I think leaders across any industry look at that way. When you try to be the authority in everything and you shut people out because you think you know better than them, you're not building a team and you're not growing. And it's funny that I think people feel the need to be that way, and they're really shooting themselves in the foot, and they're not growing, and they're not going to be the leaders that they want to be. When you take that curiosity, it's like, listen, this is what I know, and I'm going to tell you why I know it and share my experience. But if I don't know something, I'm going to ask you about it. Even when, we changed things up here and I came on for brands working with you, you're like, hey, you've been working in this for 4 or 5 months. Like, tell me about it, educate me so I can help you. And that was awesome that you're like, you've been doing this longer. So tell me what you guys have been doing and let's work on fixing this. That meant a lot to me and our team. So, that's why I looked at you. I think you're taking the right approach here. So
back to athletics, just again, everything in my mind, like,
me too.
I feel like I was very fortunate that the model of leadership I saw was a coach, right? And it doesn't matter how great of a lineman my dad was when he played. He was never putting on a uniform and going out there to play. He really had to trust that he was a good enough leader, that his team was going to be able to show up and perform, right? To me, that's the mark of a great leader, is that the people that I train and the people that I support are able to do the job better than I ever could myself. Like, I never want to be the kind of leader in any capacity that I think I could do it better than my team. Imagine how that would make you feel if I thought I could do your job better than you. Like, that wouldn't make you feel very motivated and inspired. And I'm like, why has it taken so many leaders so long to learn that?
Yeah.
Like, that seems like it was leadership 101. But again, I didn't grow up with in a boardroom watching Suits. Like, I grew up watching coaching and teaching. That was my mark of leadership. So I feel like that has served me well in my professional leadership career for sure.
100%. There's something different to athletics and just the relationship that you have with your coaches, right? Where they could, I played football too, at the high school level, not to the point your dad did, but my coach, who to me had a great impact on my life, grabs you by the face mask, yells in your face, pushes you, like stuff like that, punishes you with up downs and other things and running. But you also at that level somehow are able to separate the man from what he's doing. He's trying to motivate you. He's trying to get you better in the way that he knows how. Right.
Mhm.
And in sports, you learn just because this guy is yelling at me for 5 minutes because I blew up a play, he just wants me to get to a point where it's like, you don't want to do that again. And it's going
Yeah.
to get me better. And then when we're off the field, like, when he sees me in the halls and everything else, it's the most supportive guy in the world. Right. So you're able to kind of, and I think if you can translate that to business, where if you have a negative conversation with your boss, not if they tell you you're like a piece of shit or something like that, like your coach used to, it's a little different, but where it's like, you're doing that. And I don't mean you specifically, but your boss or your leader is doing that because they're trying to get you to be better at your job.
It's
To make you,
accountability. It's
exactly.
accountability. Great leaders
But it
hold
doesn't
their
mean that they
people
hate you.
accountable. Right. It's like, if I was a swimmer and I played water polo, and it's like, I feel like the best coaches that I ever had were diligent about holding me accountable.
Yes.
And that's how I hope to be as a leader, right? That I'm not going to say, Todd, what the F? Why didn't you close that deal? Blah, 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 blah. What's wrong with you? Right. But what I'm saying is more along the lines of, hey, how can I hold you accountable?
Yeah.
How can I hold you to the fact that, hey, you said you were going to do something, you didn't do it, or you did do it, kind of like what's going on, right? So that's really where I would say the best leadership comes is not in scrutinizing, is not in finding something to tell people they're doing wrong. It's holding them accountable when you have to.
I love it. So we have gone over the hour. Your next appointment is here, but we always end this on a forward thinking segment, right?
Love it.
So looking at the industry, spring big, whatever it is, you talk about new markets coming online and everything else. What are you most excited about for 2021 for you, for spring big, for the industry? Just give us your forward looking outlook.
I would say, 2021 specific, what I'm looking forward to the most is being able to be in person with people again. I'm a people person, so I have missed being able to be in the field, in dispensaries, seeing people's operations. I feel like that's where a lot of the magic happens. And that's, a really just great way to get to know the industry. So I'm really excited about that. Zooming out a little bit, of just like the 2021 new normal of it all. I'm really, really excited for more women in this industry.
Yes.
I'm really excited for social equity to get the attention it deserves, to be done well. States like Massachusetts, I'm really excited about. I think there's a lot of states with social equity reform on the ballot to, incorporate into their licensing structure. Can't wait for that. And I feel like overall, I am hopeful and I am anticipatory for a day where we are not tiptoeing around the ridiculous regulations that we are today, just to talk about a plant. So I'm hopeful for a much better tool belt of tools for our industry in the future as we see laws change and evolve.
Very cool. Well, thank you for that. And if there's any social media, anything spring break related you want to promote, let's tell everybody now, and then we can get out of here.
Yeah, you can follow us on LinkedIn, or you could follow us on Instagram. I think it's at Springbig Rewards.
Yes, at Springbig Rewards.
At Springbig Rewards on Instagram. I'm not that interesting on Instagram, but if you want to give me a follow, I do. When I am traveling, I always have some cool cannabis content on there and lots of plant medicine facts. I am at mk.instas on Instagram.
Very cool. Well, Mikaela, thank you very much for doing this.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And thank you everybody at home for watching. A shameless plug for Spring Big, because I am pumped for New York legalization. If you're a cannabis company, you're operating in New York, give us a call. We want to help you. I want a reason to go to New York, but seriously, we can help you out. So New York, as you come online, reach out to us. We're excited to work with you. I'm excited for cannabis in the Big Apple. Folks, tune in tomorrow at 4:20. We have our technology panel. Mikaela and I will be on it. We're going to be joined by some friends. It's going to be awesome. Of course, if you missed any part of this conversation, it'll be live on our YouTube next week on Monday at youtube.com/elevateyourgrind. I think we're done with episodes for the week. Nope. Friday, Emily Paxia. We have Emily Paxia from Poseidon Partners on Friday.
That'll be a great one.
Yeah,
I'll
I love Emily.
For that.
She is the first person to do the show 3 times. So I got to give her some kind of a
repeat. I love it.
Exactly. So we have Emily on Friday. We've got some great guests for you next week as well, too. Keep tuning in. We are live on facebook.com/Cannabis Group, as well as our LinkedIn group at the Cannabis Lab, folks. This is another episode of Elevate Your Grind, and we will see you on Friday.